made a video some time ago talking about how much I enjoy Kill Blue, the manga from Shonen Jump, which I believe to be the next major hit from them. I'm kind of surprised that like it's only 68 chapters in. So I think that means it's barely a year old, like maybe a little over that. So I don't know how long it's been running, or if it's like running weekly or bi-weekly or whatever. But like there is no denying that this is my personal favorite of the current lineup that I've read. Obviously, like new series are coming and going all the time, and Kill Blue doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Thankfully, like my belief is that that it's actually pretty popular in Japan, but with no anime adaptation and seemingly no Western fan base at all. Like I really do need to come out and really remind everyone to go ahead and read Kill Blue because it is an absolute treat. And I'm essentially caught up with it now. I'm like 8 volumes away, 8 chapters away from like being caught up. So I have a pretty good understanding of like the strengths of the story and unfortunately the weaknesses. And there are quite a few. I am generally really happy about the series. I'm very enthusiastic about it. So my quibbles about it are very few and far between, but they do exist. And I do want to take the time to talk about them in this video so you all have a good understanding of my current feelings regarding this series and how it's progressing so far. I think the first thing that we really need to talk about is the characters because I've given a lot of praise to the core cast being the protagonist. What's his name? Like Izuno or Juno or like, man, I can never remember these games. Like I really enjoy the protagonist and like his struggle of like fitting in with middle school life. I really like the female lead Norin. She really sticks out. I like characters like Tenma Tendo, right? The all-star athlete who excels in 3 different sports, right? I love like all the sense of humor and like all the situations they get into and how they're constantly making new friends, right? All of that is really interesting. But and this is a really potent observation, I think, is that there are way too many characters with very poorly thought out character arcs and an inability to kind of mesh together, like outside of their relationships with the core cast, right? So, what do I mean by that, right? Well, you have like a lot of people at the middle school that the protagonist attends, right? You have like the students he meets. You have like Norin and her friends, like her network, and like slowly the protagonist starts building up his own like friend group in the home ec club, right? This is the core aspect of the story. The thing about this though is that like he has friends outside of the home ec club that almost feel like have been completely forgotten about, right? The 2 girls he rescued from the pervert, whose names I can never remember, and like the guy who refers to his master, right? Like again, this is really interesting. Like they really set up like that Ogami, that's his name. Ogami was really impressed with the master being like a normal middle school student, like who was nice to him and helped him get started with his grades and like grasping the fundamentals and really like really getting a good start on middle school life, right? The master was the like grounding character for the first several chapters of the story, but then he introduced Ogami to his sister, like the leader of the home ec club, and like Ogami joined that club, and the master has almost been completely forgotten about, right? Like the master makes occasional appearances, right? He's still friends with the protagonist, ostensibly, but like considering just how little he's been involved with like the core plot and all the crazy things that have happened with Norin and surrounding characters and like him making new friends, like it just feels like the whole deal with like referring to him as the master has completely fallen flat. And maybe that was the point of the character, but like when you look at like some of the other cast members, people like the Capo or like Nekata or like some of the other home ec members, right? Like they have like, maybe a couple of major sequences like dedicated to them, and then they're just relegated to background characters most of the time, right? And this is really, really annoying because you get these situations where these characters are introduced, they fall out of the plot, and then they come back like 20, 30 chapters later, like, oh yeah, I know that you're an assassin. Like, wait, what? Like, oh, I know this about you. Like, oh, you look like the woman that came to the parent teacher conference, right? Like again, they make all these observations about other characters, right? They come to really interesting conclusions, but there are so many cast members, there's so much going on, and they all have so much like in such an insane background that it's really, really difficult to keep track of who knows what and what that means in the overarching plot. Like Tenma Tendo out of nowhere, in chapter like in the 50s, he's like, "Oh yeah, I know that Ogami is an assassin, but you too, other character like Pacifier Guy." And Pacifier Guy is just like, "Yes, I am." And I'm just kind of like, was this not established? Like I didn't remember that Tenma Tendo was aware that Ogami was an assassin. I wasn't aware that he did not know that Pacifier Guy was not an assassin. Like I was just kind of like, so nobody is on the same page. It honestly feels like you just have this situation where all this stuff is happening, and yet nothing's really come up of it yet, right? You have the daughter that's never really been seen. We've seen her in like background scene art sometimes, and she's had like one line of dialogue, but we know nothing about her, right? We know nothing about their relationship, right? We know her mom, Agami's ex-wife, and like we have a general idea of their dynamic, right? Which is actually pretty interesting because they're divorced, but they actually get along really, really well. Like again, you have this interesting character dynamic, but you don't really go anywhere with it. And then like you have like these situations where like the partner guy, like Nekata, right? Like he's sitting around all the time in the apartment just watching Ogami like attend middle school, like giving commentary and like being the exposition guy. And it kind of dawned on me like 50 chapters in, like what do we know about Nekata as a character, right? Does Nekata do anything other than just comment on like what Ogami is doing and like how Ogami is feeling about it, right? It's just like the character feels weirdly flat. Like the character only exists to like keep Ogami's ties to the criminal underworld alive in a lot of ways, right? And again, like a lot of the characters feel that way, is that they're introduced purely to push the plot forward in some asinine way. And that is a very noted observation. Like, these are characters that were around from the very beginning, and they've slowly been replaced by characters that are like way more interesting and are way more popular, right? That I think the creators can do more with. I can actually tell you a little bit about my Odahime, right? I can tell you about Tenma Tendo. I can tell you about like Norin and her personality, right? A little bit of her background, right? Like the characters that were introduced like around the second half of volume 1 or like later, like they are so much more well-rounded and interesting than a lot of the secondary characters, and it's really distracting when you really take notice of it. And I suppose the second major point kind of ties into this a little bit. I kind of touched on this a little bit when it comes to like characters just kind of revealing things they know about other characters that kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere. The series seems to have this really weird tendency to like completely retcon things that happened in the last chapter, right? And it happens in really weird ways too. Like they're not actually proofreading everything that's going on. So there's this one sequence where like Ogami stays home from school, right? And everyone from the home ec club seems to have nothing better to do than to go over to his house and check up on him, right? Because apparently they're all just that close. So like you have a bunch of people there. you have like the home ec leader, you have Norin, you have the capo, you have like a bunch of those people, and then like you get to the next chapter, and all of a sudden like the disciplinary club is there, right? Like, oh, I came in between chapters. Because like she wasn't there in that initial shot when they show up at the door, right? You saw everyone standing on front of the door. So like all of a sudden, like the disciplinary chick is there, like the one with the weird dot on her head. Like I don't know what those are called, but like anyway, like she shows up and she's just like, yeah, I showed up in between chapters basically, and I'm just like, what purpose does that serve, right? Because she doesn't do anything in that arc. She doesn't do anything like any lore wise. Like she's just there because her partner Shindo is there, right? The other guy from the disciplinary committee who does have a lot to do with that arc, right? Again, like it just seems really contrived and forced. And that wasn't the only instance I noticed, right? There was this one instance where like Agami's getting beat up by a furry, right? It's a chick wearing like a bear suit or something, and for some reason she's really strong. And by the way, like we don't learn anything about like any of the killers that come after him. So like you get these like weird situations where like, oh yeah, middle school students are attacking the protagonist, but we don't know anything about them or their background, right? We have girls in fursuits. We have like guys with tentacle fetishes. Like it's a literal fetish, by the way. He's obsessed with tentacles because he just they're so mature. Like what? Like you deal with tentacle guys, you deal with like women in fursuits. You don't get any explanations for this. Like they just kind of exist and they just kind of like go away to be completely forgotten about. It's it's really ridiculous. But like yeah, in this segment, like Agami's getting wrecked by the fursuit. The chick in the fursuit, and then like his ex-wife comes out of nowhere. First of all, like she was established to not be a field agent. So like she's like the head of the science department. So the fact that she's here in like some sexy cat suit was just like stuck out to me as being weird. So like she shows up, like distracts the fursuit long enough for Ogami to get away, but like she gives him this very convenient like medicine that turns him back into an adult. So it's like controllable now. So like he can just become a grown man like whenever he wants. The story of course is about like a middle-aged hitman becoming a kid and like attending middle school. So like this guy is a really hardcore hitman, almost 40, like who's in the body of a 14-year-old. So like he takes the pills, right? He becomes like his old self, and his old self is badass, by the way. But like the way this all happened felt super contrived, right? It felt like they didn't plan the progression of events well enough, right? Like it to me, it just feels like Nakota should have done something, or like he should have gotten out of that situation himself, or like Shindo should have done something. Like there were so many things wrong with it. Like there's this sequence where they legit like they park the bus that has all the kidnapped students on it. Shindo, for some reason, leaves them to get a soda, and then like he passes out. And Agami thinks it's a good idea to go check on him, completely leaving the bus unattended by like the hit lady. It's just like, what? Like to me, it was just unbearably sloppy. And I don't know if it's like the production schedule or if it's just like a weakness of the author, but like I do think they need like a better editor or someone who can like rein this in, because I have never noticed anything like this in any other manga series. It's like Spy Family doesn't do this. Well, to be fair, I don't think Spy Family tends to have like as long of character arcs or is as elaborate, right? So it's like again, when characters like disappear and like reappear in Spy Family, it feels really organic and natural, right? Anya's not seeing Mr. Green all the time because like she never really had anything to do with him, right? Like again, it makes sense when you're introduced to a character and you don't necessarily see him or her for quite a while, right? Like again, like in Spy Family, they do a really good job like balancing characters, and they really give a lot of depth to characters that you would not expect to get depth from. Stuff like from like the whole recent bit with Martha and Henderson, and just like that ridiculous like Martha just getting NTR'd like in the most brutal way imaginable. Like it's crazy. Okay, if you've read Spy Family, they do a really good job building up long-term character arcs, like without really like going without with while making it feel natural, right? Like it doesn't feel forced or fake in Spy Family. And Kill Blue doesn't seem to have the same amount of care put into it. At least not for all the minor characters, right? Ogami's progression is great, Noren's is great, but like when you compare all the other characters, like, why haven't Tenma Tendo and like the home ec chick like fucked yet? Like they've been flirting for like 30 chapters now. Like, come on, bro. Like, stick it in. Like, they're basically dating at this point, but it's like, what? Why isn't it official? Like, why can't we have, an actual couple in this like school about this story about middle schoolers? Like, what's so difficult about that? Like, I'm just like, why? Why can we not get an actual couple? Like, why is it taking so long? Like, she's giving him like a Sundere like thing, but it's not gonna stick, obviously. So it's just like, why drag this out again? Things like that, Like, and again, like you also have issues with Norin and just like her weird feelings toward Agami, like, oh, I'm in love with him. Oh, I just want to be friends with him. Like, again, it's going all over the place. And honestly, like, I don't know. It feels kind of it feels like it's been kind of falling flat lately. I said early on it was like really well handled, and I think with the Mai Orihime thing, I kind of lost me because of her like trying to convince herself that she wasn't in love with him, and like she totally is. So like, why? Like again, I could totally see why they don't want Norin to be like completely obsessed with Ogami, to keep like people like the raging golden eagles of the world, like, just being like base Japan. But like, again, like, I think they're really struggling with long-term storytelling, with like the character relationships, because it does feel like in a lot of ways the relationships between characters has been stagnant for the past couple of arcs. And there are just some forced aspects to some of these arcs, right? Where you have the characters like, oh, we're exploring a haunted house, and then they solve the mystery, and then they discover that there's something even more insane in the house, which just seems unbelievably forced. Like it's like they really couldn't have like, built up to this like more effectively. It's just like I don't know how exactly I would have done it, but you do need to think about the things you do when making something like this. Like, again, I'm really worried that like one of these like decisions is gonna make the series like go completely off the rails, and I can't imagine what that would be. But after what happened to Chainsaw Man, I wouldn't be surprised if it's just something completely ridiculous and stupid. Like, but anyway. And I suppose my final complaint is just the issue that the the arcs recently feel like they've been spinning their wheels, right? I'm not a big fan of the whole Norin is being married off thing. There's apparently some like reason for it, but it just feels kind of forced, and it gets in the way of like what I feel like should be the core plot of just Norin being a target for Hitman, and Ogami is just in a situation where he has to protect her, right? Like, to me, the whole added like high school drama, well, middle school drama of like, oh yeah, if you date Norin, you'll gain control over her father's company. It's like, I don't know. It feels ridiculous and contrived, and it can be fun, right? A lot of my favorite moments have come about because of this premise, but at the same time, it's like, it just feels a lot like it's getting in the way of what the series should be about, which should be about like, developing the assassins, the industry, the characters in that field. Like, again, if they cut back on the whole Norin getting married off stuff, they could focus a lot more on like the cool, just assassin on assassin combat. No more hero style fights, and it just doesn't really happen all that often. And when it does, it's impressive, but then it's right back to like the everyday routine, and it's just like it feels really like the plot is really more about Norin than it is everything else. Because like it's her company that turned Ogami into a child. She's the one that the hitmen are after. She has like some deep dark secret inside of her that like the bad guys want for some reason. We still don't know what it is. So it's like, okay, Norin is important. We got it. But like, did we really need it to have this weird like marry off this like middle school girl thing? Like, she's like what, 14? And like her dad is trying to pimp her out to like older men. Like, just like, what? Like, this is like worse than Persona 5. What was happening to like Haru? It's like it's the same mindset. Like, is this a thing that actually happens in Japan with like the upper class, like legit political marriages? Like, again, to me, it's like it just feels really super contrived and really gets in the way of like the characterizations, right? I could buy like Norin getting like whored out to men in like her private life, but I feel like in her middle school life, she should be able to like escape from that, right? Like, that's why she likes Ogami so much, right? Is because like he's not really interested in pursuing that with her. So to me, it's like it feels like an essential part of the character that's a really big part of what makes her who she is, but like there's too much focus on it, and a lot of the characters that come about because of this just really don't leave much of an impression. Shindo comes into the picture, but like he's not interested in Noren. Odahime comes in the picture, and she's great, but she's not interested in Noren. She's interested in Ogami for some reason, right? You have again, it just feels like, do you really need this like weird hook of just like, ooh, Norin is an object? Like, I don't think it's really doing it for me at this stage. It's like it's getting in the way of what like we really should be doing, of like getting to the bottom of like the secret of like who she is and her background and like everything that's going on with like the organization. Like, again, maybe we'll get that in like future chapters, but like the way it looks now to me is that like um Norin's felt kind of a flat character for a while now. Not too bad, but like it's weird. The plot entirely revolves around her, but like a lot of times, like the story is focused on developing other characters. Mai being a recent example, and just doing like the following arc of just like going to her estate and just that situation. It's like eh, right now she feels more like a plot device. I can't remember the last time I really felt like she really, really had something interesting to say. And I had a lot of praise for her, like you know, like early on, but like now it just kind of feels like, ugh. Again, this is maybe just me nitpicking, but because I still really, really like the character, but the long and short of it is like I'm not sure where the plot is going at this stage, right? Like, are we gonna do this middle school drama stuff forever? Are we gonna move past it? Is Ogami gonna get his old body back? Like, again, it feels almost like the series really needs a radical shakeup, but I don't really, I can't imagine what that would amount to. Like, again, like the way it feels right now is that they're just gonna keep introducing new characters and keep expanding the friend group and keep like getting into like more of these wacky hijinks, and I'm really curious just how long they can keep that entertaining. I don't know if I could do something like that. So I I'm definitely really curious to see like where the series is going to be at when it hits the 100 chapter mark. If it's going to become popular over here, if it's going to blow up. This is definitely a series that I really want to keep my eye on and really want people to read and support. So definitely check it out if you get a chance. I am a big, big fan of Kill Blue.